Hello. As we embark on our study of the human figure, I'd like you to look at some approaches that a few artists have taken to the figure that I hope will kind of inspire our study as we begin. Let's take a look at this figure by Niki de Saint-Phalle. This may not be what you would have expected to see opening a slide lecture on figure drawing. It's not a drawing. It's a monumental sculpture covered with mosaic. But I'd like you to imagine that you were walking along through a park and you see this thing beginning to loom over the treetops. Do you wonder what it is? Do you go to look at it? Or do you just walk away? I think if you were like me, you'd probably feel very compelled to come explore this thing, maybe to walk around it. You might even want to climb up on it if they'd let you. You can see a little figure down here in the lower left so that you can tell the scale of this thing. It looks like it's 20, 25 feet tall, probably, right? I'd say the energy, the fun, the humor, the weirdness of this piece is a lot of its charm, but it also took a lot of know-how, correct? It took some determination. It took a lot of discipline to cover this piece with mosaic in these beautiful patterns. And so even though this piece is maybe a very unusual, distorted, childlike, playful approach to the human figure, even though it mostly seems to be about expression, without some kind of structured discipline, it couldn't have been brought into the world, right? Let's look at a drawing kind of at the other end of my energy and structure continuum that I'm trying to draw here. This is by Ingres. He was even in the context of his time, late 1800s, he was considered to be a very highly skilled and disciplined artist. You can see that his work is extremely accurate and controlled. People are not born drawing this way, friends. He practiced for decades and was just an extremely accurate artist who could do whatever he wanted with his pencil. Society ladies loved to come to him to get their portraits drawn because he'd make them look like a piece of sculpture. No, beautiful drawing. Anyone would be proud to do it, right? My own favorite parts about this drawing, I'm going to see if I can circle them with my mouse here. I love this place here where he repositioned the hands, right? He hadn't made his mind up yet. He was trying different things to see what he wanted. I love this place here where I can sort of tell myself a little story that he did these two beautiful profiles of Adam and Eve looking at each other, and then he thought, I haven't quite nailed her chin. I think I'll try that again. I love these places here, like on Adam's biceps here, where we see a first line and then a second line. You'll see that kind of thing again down here. And over again, if you look closely at the drawing, you'll see that he corrects himself. He changes his mind, and he's not standing there with an eraser covering his tracks. He knows that the right line has power, and that leaving that first attempt doesn't make you look like a loser, right? It's part of the expression of the piece. It's part of the energy of the piece. It gives it a looseness. It gives it an interest for us that I have no desire to see somebody go through here with an eraser and clean up these little first tries, right? To me, they make this piece very beautiful. So energy and structure. I've chosen two pieces that I think. The Niki de Saint-Phalle, I think, is way down here on the energy end, and I think Ingres is about as far towards the structure end as you might want to get. But this isn't just a continuum. This is what we call a dialectic. Energy and structure are two things that every work of art needs, I believe. If you've been in any of my other classes, you will have seen this slide before, but please bear with me. Energy is associated with tempo, athletic, dynamic movement, right? Energy reminds us of the artist's hand. It is expressive, right? It points to the artist. It comes from the artist's body. It comes from the artist taking a risk, right? Structure. You usually have to slow down, right, to get it. Structure requires, advertises your fine motor skills, right? It takes time to develop those. Structure gives us accurate information about the world, right? So those Adam and Eve look much more like real figures, for example, than that mosaic sculpture did. Structure points to the subject. It takes control and it expresses control. Both these things are important to give us work that expresses the artist and also interests the viewer. But I think energy is more important, and energy has to come first. I'm going to show you just a few more works of art. One by Egon Schiele. This is a self-portrait, a beautiful drawing that I love. Just going to ask you to imagine for a moment what it would feel like to make a brush stroke like this one that I'm indicating with my mouse here, or this one here, in a drawing where you'd already made a line like this, right? How would that feel? I know how it makes me feel. It makes me want to try to get more expressive marks out of my brush, to see what it will do, to find out what I haven't done yet, what I haven't pushed for yet. I think this is a very expressive drawing because of the way he used the brush with his body. And I think it's highly structured as well. It shows a lot of skill. I feel like I'd know him anywhere if I saw him after looking at this drawing, even though it's a very quirky and personal take on the human face and figure. And we're going to end with a few pieces by Sargent. Those of you who've been in my drawing classes before know that I love this guy. This is a drawing of the model in the studio that for me just really expresses the dialectic between energy and structure. Look at the way he moves his arm while he's creating the shadows and the negative shape. Look at that negative shape, how beautifully he indicates the mat or the stand that the model's standing on, the shadows in the background. But as if it only took him seconds to draw it, right? And I'm sure it did. And then look at how he carefully shows us these contours, these shadows, these edges, this likeness here. But the way that it's drawn is actually very similar to the way the negative shapes are drawn in the background. Very beautifully integrated. I'd like to be able to integrate structure and energy that way. But that was a quick studio drawing. Let's see how Sargent does this in a much more finished work. This is a painting, I'm going to say about 8 feet tall. It's in the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston, and it was done for that museum. Gardner was a very important patron of Sargent's, and thanks to her we have quite a record of how he balanced that energy structure dialectic as he worked on this huge painting. So as you look at it, it's obviously the work of a skilled master, right? Somebody who could paint a hand like that can do anything in my book. But not everything in the picture is painted that way, correct? Let's see how he developed this composition. I always like to think that although it's very hard to imagine doing that painting, it's a little easier to imagine doing these study drawings that he started with for the flamenco dancer. What would it feel like? Try to imagine doing these drawings. These are almost ecstatically gestural, right? You can feel himself just throwing himself at the paper. He is moving as fast as the dancer is, right? He is, you get the feeling that his models may have been in motion. At least he didn't require them to stand still for very long, right? Look at this garment flowing out the side here. I feel that she must have been dancing while he was drawing. Very, very energetic. You can't put that kind of energy in at the end of a work of art. You have to start with it. And we see him starting here on a different rectangle, of course, than his final canvas, a much smaller one. These are some study paintings that he did for those figures in the background. And although maybe it would be difficult to imagine painting that finished painting, I bet you can imagine yourself painting a mark like this, painting a leg like this, painting a hand with one line like that, or painting an arm with one stroke like that, right? Now these strokes were strokes by the hand of a master who had been practicing drawing since he was a small child, but still they show us that structure has to have energy at its base, right, to interest us and to move us. Look at the way, for example, that this piece of drapery is painted. You can feel in this red drapery just a few motions of his hand. Of course, those motions are very practiced, and that's where the structure comes in. He's building here towards his final piece by studying that figure that he wants in the center. That figure in the center of his painting is all about motion and energy, right? But it takes a lot of structured work to decide exactly how you're going to convey that feeling of motion and energy. Here we see a very, very loose rendition of the figure. Here we see him kind of pouring it all on, kind of showing us every little bone, every little vein, the little bracelet on her hand, the lifelines in her palm, right? We see exactly how the light falls on the figure. We see the drapery very, very closely studied. We see Sargent exploring how far he wants to go with his skills and his energy. Let's go to the final figure here. I'd like you to remember this part of the drapery here. I always like to sort of admire how he decided to pull back a bit. He's a very self-confident artist. He didn't feel that he had to impress anyone at this point, right? He knew that if you paint a hand like this, people are going to let you get away with guitars like that, right? You don't have to bring everything up to a high degree of finish. He didn't have this dutiful feeling that each guitar, that each hand, that each shadow or piece of fabric had to be depicted in the same way. He knew where he wanted our eyes to go. He knew what he wanted this painting to do to us and to say to us and to make us feel. And his ability to create structure was reined in by his desire to communicate energy. As we go on into figure drawing, I hope that you'll keep that in mind. Energy comes from the artist's body. Energy is what gives expression to our work. No matter how skilled you become, and I hope that you will become very, very skilled, energy, the energy of your body, is always going to be the most important thing. We're going to start with exercises to bring out that energy. We're going to continue with exercises to add to your skills. I hope this will be lots of fun, and I look forward to working with you and with the human figure.